Welcome to Never Again Is Now, a podcast about anti-Semitism. I am Evelyn Marcus.
And I am Phyllis Zimbler Miller.
Anti-Semitism continues to hit record levels, with college campus serving as primary breeding grounds. Rabbi Erez Sherman of Sinai Temple, a prominent synagogue in Los Angeles, has launched the first of its kind education program to prepare Jewish high schoolers for the anti-Semitic college campuses. We have the honor to speak with him today. Rabbi Sherman, welcome back to our show. You were on with a different topic last year. Welcome back. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you. I look forward to the day that we don't have to do the show anymore.
Exactly. Yes.
Before we talked about another program that you had started for young people, but this one is now for younger people. Tell us how you came up with the idea and what started you thinking to do this?
Exactly. I like to say the helicopters, meaning last night I heard them as well down the street from UCLA. I said, oh no. And there was I just heard that it was a sukkah that was used now as an encampment. So
No.
I say that in jest, but in reality, it's, as you just said, to open up the show. It's the hundreds% uptick in anti-Semitism. We used to say we must start with college students, and then we said we must start with high school students. So we're now starting with high school students at Sinai Temple through our Flesh Family Israel Center. And this idea came to us in two ways. Obviously, post October 7th, I was going to different schools because students were asking us to come to high schools. And when you realize what was happening even in high schools, I very quickly realized that we were sending these kids to schools, but they had no support while they're actually there in terms of what was happening with whether it's teachers or administrators or even students.
You mean when sending them to college?
No, this actually, when I saw what was happening in high schools, just a couple of weeks after October 7th, I went to a very large public high school where some of our teens were, and they said, Rabbi, would you come and stand in the quad with us and do like a little activity? And so we wrote letters to IDF soldiers, literally like October 16th. And I was asked by the administration of that school, will there be other flags besides Israel flag to make sure that we're equal? And I thought, oh my gosh, like I'm not there, but I'm there for 20 minutes. And so I ended up going back and writing an article explaining that we have to be with our students. So that was then. Fast forward a couple of months later, with the generosity of the Robert M. Barron Foundation and his daughter, Julie Platt, she said, was very active in the college scene. She said, I want students to go to any college campus that they choose. And that was really important for her, but also for us, not to back away, but to go into those spaces. And we said, well, how can they go into those spaces without those resources? And so we said, and I said, as the last time I was on the show, I was dealing with rabbinical students, who, by the way, we're in our third cohort, have now trained over 50 students. There's basically a waiting list. So that's exciting when we went from ideal to real. And this is the same thing. And we thought, you know what, how are we going to get these students? We haven't seen them since their bar mitzvahs or bat mitzvahs. And once again, with the highest caliber experts in the field, we recruited our own students. And it's really crucial that the hub was going to be a synagogue. These people are already attached to a synagogue. Rabbi Wolpe had just gone through his year at Harvard, and we had him speak to the students first. And we came up with the curriculum of what we would like our students to get to. They're not going to know everything. They're not going to know how to be the president of the Hill right away, but they're going to know when they go to whatever college campus they want to go to, whether it's Harvard, Columbia, or Vanderbilt, or Tulane, or UCLA, or SMC, that when they get there, they will have the confidence, they will have enough knowledge. Most importantly, they will have the tools and my phone number to make sure that they can step on a campus and make a difference. And one thing that a parent said to me the first week that we did this was, I'm not looking for the big victory. I don't know what that means. Is it the death of Sinwar? Is it the death of Nasrallah? Is that the big victory? He said, I want my child to have little victories so that they can be part of something bigger going forward. And I've really taken that to heart in terms of what we're going to do to get there. And most importantly is we have monthly seminars. So Rabbi Wolpe, Jonathan Greenblatt, CEO of ADL, will be, right, not somebody from the ADL, but Jonathan Greenblatt, who's taking his time to speak to teenagers in our synagogue. This Saturday or this Sunday, we have Sarah Idan, Miss Universe from Iraq, who made a big splash when she took a picture with Miss Israel. She's coming. And the other part we do is immersive experiences. It's not just learning from a person, but we're going to do a Shabbat at UC Hillel. So the high school students know what it feels like to walk down Bruin Walk, to go into a Shabbat dinner, to meet a student leader that maybe was just like them 18 months ago. In combination with that. And finally, we're going to go national. And so with some really nice media over the last couple of weeks, we've gotten inquiries from synagogues, and I say synagogues specifically, from around the country across the denominations that said, well, how can we replicate this? And so we will be the hub of different synagogues around the country. So that maybe in 2 years, when we go national next year, those students who all go to Tulane, just picking a campus with lots of Jews, will say, oh my gosh, we were part of the Barron Scholars Program. We went through this training so that we're ready to go right when we get on this campus.
And
So,
obviously,
yeah.
I just want to say, and as they see what works and what doesn't work, then they're going to feed that back to you and you're going to be able to, change things around. So this is going to be a really important loop.
Absolutely. It's a pilot cohort.
Right. So, if I understand you well, the goal of the program is to build confidence in high schoolers for the time when they will have to go to campus.
Yeah, I think there's three goals in that or missions in that goal. One, we like to say identifying anti-Semitism. You can't do anything about it until you actually identify it.
Yeah.
So, was the joke that the kid said on the playground, was that just a joke or is that actually considered anti-Semitism? Well, let's learn from the experts what that looks like. Two is combating it, but you can't combat it until you identify it. And three, which I think we've learned a lot about this past year since October 7th, is allyship. And allyships don't come out of nowhere. And sometimes allyships uh, don't flower to the ones that we thought they would. And so, how do you identify those groups that we believe we can form allyships with? Just the other day, somebody said they were in Norwalk, California, and they were going to their son's baseball game. And on this huge mega church, they saw a huge banner that said, "We stand with Israel." I said, "Do me a favor. You have a picture of that?" Yes. I would like to call that pastor and just say thank you. Because I
Yep.
don't think that people are necessarily hearing from us gratitude as much as they might understand that as well. So all those three missions fall under what you just said in terms of the confidence, because confidence is a ethereal, amorphous word, but if we can put tangibles to confidence, then I think we can build to something better.
And if I understand you well, it's not so much about the anti-Semitism on high school they experience now, but about the anti-Semitism they will experience on campus. Is that correct?
Yeah, so when I look at the cohort of our pilot cohort, they represent, and I know this podcast is national, but I'll just say local wise here. Out of 17 students, they represent 11 different schools.
Mm.
Jewish private schools, secular private schools, and secular public schools, all who are graduates of either our day school of Sinai Akiva Academy or our Sinai Temple Religious School. And so some of these kids hadn't seen each other in 3 years since they
Mhm.
left for Bar Mitzvah, and I watched the family sort of reunite. And so they are, and what's beautiful already, one of the students on the first anniversary of October 7th did a yellow ribbon campaign in their secular private school. They were afraid of the pushback. They got no pushback. They only received, I don't want to say praise, but gratitude. Some of those students went to the Nova exhibit on their own and brought students from their schools, then came back and wrote in their school newspapers. I'm watching these kids who I would call them doing heroic acts
Mhm.
with confidence, which I believe has been bred within our own synagogue community.
That is fantastic to hear. But again, my question is will your program be about the anti-Semitism these students can come across at their current high school, or is it about the anti-Semitism they will come across on campus
Right. So
in
definitely
college?
campus. We absolutely know it's on campus. However, we have now seen that it is also in high schools in smaller ways, absolutely smaller ways. I know we'll talk about Colombia in a little while and
Mhm.
how over a 2 decade period that it's grown and some of the reasons why I think it has grown. Um, in the public school system, there's lots of anti-Semitic things happening, whether it's purposeful or not, or the intentional. I don't necessarily have an answer exactly, but it's definitely there. These students are experiencing it. And so, yes, it's absolutely for the preparation of the college campus, but we are definitely seeing, at least this year, some incidences in a high school campus. So, in that case, let's talk about this and work on this now, too.
Yes. And so you want to affect the students' knowledge, and confidence. Are there also skills, maybe behavioral skills, how to react in a aggressive discussion about Israel, or what is it you train them
Yep. So
in?
he must have been sitting in our first session with Rabbi Wolpe because the first session was with students and parents, and the parents would not get out of their chairs. They were like, "We need this too."
Mm,
So you said, an aggressive conversation. Rabbi Wolpe, I'm just sharing what he shared based on his Harvard experience. Some aggressive conversations you're never going to win, right? Even with the actual facts. And
mhm,
so, is there a point in that? However, a parent asked, how Jewish can my child be on the college application essay?
Mm.
mm,
Because who's reading that? And he gave an example that I'm not going to share publicly that was concerning. And when that student was denied access to a certain school, he asked the student, would you like me to fight for you? And the student said, if I was rejected because of that, don't fight for me. I don't want to be in that place. So the questions that were coming up that my oldest is 12 years old, that I can't even imagine people are, these aren't just computer generated essays. These are people reading these essays. So there's the aggressive aspect. There is the writing aspect. There's the, right, how Jewish should I be? It was sort of, should I be wearing my Jewish star this year? But then to hear that, well, how Jewish can I be and how I even present myself to go to a campus? Um, I believe that I don't even have all of the questions that we're trying to prepare for them yet. And so we're trying to be proactive in preparing for them for the questions and incidences that we don't even know about yet. But it has to
yeah,
start somewhere. When I was 17, going into 18 in 2000, going to the Columbia campus, I was not thinking about this. And for this to be the front and center topic on a Jewish student's mind, not by desire, but sort of by force, we're actually trying to change that paradigm that they can be a Jewish leader by desire and not by need. Because right
Mm.
now it's definitely by need.
yeah. So you are yourself a graduate of Columbia University from about 20 years ago. What was the climate for Jews at Columbia campus back then?
Mm-hmm. So I'll give you two examples. I entered the Columbia campus in 2000, uh, and it was basically the beginning of the second Intifada. On College Walk at Columbia University. There was no SJP officially. There was a Palestinian student movement. I do remember the tension, them on one side and us on the other. But I was a music major, and so I was dealing with D major and F sharp minor, right? It didn't go into those classes at all. However, my roommate was in Joseph Mossad's class. I say Professor Joseph Mossad, who, if you Google him, you can find that last week he was in Turkey at a pro-October 7th conference. And you have to remember, so my roommate, who was Jewish, spoke up in that class and got sort of ridiculed. The internet and social media didn't really exist back then in the biggest way, but there was stuff written about him. 20 years later, who are the professors on the campus? People taught by Joseph Mossad, by Edward Said, right? You
Yeah.
probably saw this week. Professor Shai Davidai, I'm not sure if he's been on this podcast yet, but Professor Davidai was like basically, I don't know if he was let go, but he's not allowed on campus right now. He's been
Right.
denied access to campus, but Joseph Mossad can still teach in the classroom.
Yeah.
Um, so when I began to realize that this people my age, I'm 42 years old, are professors on college campuses who were sitting in Joseph Mossad's class, it's very easy to understand why the climate is what it is today, but I didn't realize what it would be back then.
Yeah.
Another incident on the Columbia campus back then was when President Bollinger, who was the president at the time, invited President Ahmadinejad of Iran to
Oh
speak
yeah.
at
I
Lerner
remember that. Yeah.
at the student center. And I remember standing outside protesting. Um, and then if you watch the clip of it, you know, he's very big on free speech, which is very important, obviously. And he introduced him by saying everything that he was, oppressor and against women's rights and LGBTQ. And then what did Ahmadinejad stand up and say? He said, "That's how you welcome a guest to your home." So it sort of backfired on him. I think obviously there's a fine line between free speech and hate speech. There's also a fine line between protesting and breaking rules. I thought we saw that a lot on the college campus. And what happened after the police were finally allowed into the Columbia University campus, right? It was about during Pesach time. When they realized that there were actual consequences, then you didn't see anything anymore. At the same time, just last week, I don't know the person's name, but who basically said, I wish I could murder Zionists. They rescinded the apology. So you have this culture now that, I don't know, if I was 17 years old again and making that decision, I don't know if I would be ready to go into that environment. And that's what we're also speaking about with our teens. When they asked Rabbi Wolpe, like, where should my child go?
Mhm.
Is that Harvard has an amazing Jewish community. My closest friends are from the Columbia Hillel and the Jewish community there. We have a great Jewish community. When you walk out the doors of the Craft Center at Hillel, what you are facing, are you ready to actually face that? And I don't know at this moment.
And I'm a lot older than you, and I will just say, so I started college at Michigan State in 1966 during the Vietnam War. Columbia was a hotbed of protest. And came from a town in which I was usually the only Jewish kid in my class. So in a way that protected me, they didn't expect Jews. And yet I got to college and was immediately faced with anti-Semitism and my two roommates from Detroit, etc. But at the time, one just accepted it. I mean, it was just, that's what it was. So you talk about Columbia changing in the last 20 years, but in my mind, Columbia hasn't changed at all. That if you apply to Columbia, you have to be, anytime since 66, you have to
Uh,
be prepared to know that Columbia students will frequently take to the streets. That's an
yeah,
expression.
I maybe hit it at the right time, right? It was
Yeah, a
2000.
calm is all I'm saying.
Yeah, no, no, no. I totally hear it. I remember, as my age, as you just said, I remember hearing the stories of what happened in the 60s. I saw it in a golden age, if you wish. Wearing a kippah was like, honestly, growing up as a rabbi's kid in upstate New York, I didn't wear a kippah outside of the synagogue, not for any anti-Semitic aspects, but that was sort of the tradition of what we were doing. When I got to Columbia, it was the first time that I felt free to wear a kippah for the first time. I don't know if that is the case as much today.
No, no. Um, so uh, you're actually not surprised, I understand, Rabbi Sherman,
At Columbia,
at Columbia,
I'm
what's happening
saddened.
there.
I'm very saddened. Again, because there is such a large Jewish population, it saddens me even more that it's there, right? It's interesting. We had Reverend Johnny Moore, who very big in the evangelical Christian movement, and on October 15th, when he was here at Sinai Temple, he said every Jew will feel safe in a Christian university, which was interesting, hard to hear, and at the same time, like we talked about the alliances, been some really beautiful allyship going on. I just got a email from a Catholic priest in the neighborhood that said on October 7th his church fasted this year for the hostages and
Oh.
said based on the Pope's suggestion. So
Mhm.
when you hear those pieces, I am a hopeful person, but it's a one by one person. And yeah, look, you saw the Columbia president is no longer there. It took a little while to get to the point. I'm on a Columbia Jewish alumni app. You see a lot of voices. It's the most active WhatsApp I have. You hear a lot of people frustrated. And then you also saw, for instance, at Ramaz Day School in New York, modern Orthodox Jewish day school, I believe this is the first year in decades that not one student chose to go to Columbia University.
Yeah. Wow.
And that also saddens me because, like I said in the beginning, our ideal is you can go to those places to make a difference, but we're seeing others say, right now, no, thank you.
Yeah, and you should be able to go there because you like to go there.
Exactly.
And now you can, it's hard to do that as a Jew, and that's an awful situation, I think. Could you tell us, you mentioned Edward Said as being a professor back then at Columbia University. Who was he and what is his influence on what is happening today, you think?
Yeah, I mean, he was giving a Palestinian narrative that, look, was very biographical, but it's this free speech, hate speech type of line when you're dealing with anti-Zionism, not pro-Palestinian, anti-Zionism. And this pro-anti thing is also very confusing, right? I'm pro-Israel, I'm anti this. As I mentioned, I heard the Queers for Palestine uh, podcast with you. I thought it was fascinating. Um, and by the way, so it's a little tangent, but I think it's relevant. How the narrative is told is important. I just listened to a podcast, but I forgot his name, Coates, right? The African American and when he said they were like he was interviewed by Ezra Klein on the New York Times podcast. And Ezra Klein, who has his Israel leanings, he said Israel's not a democracy, all these types of things. He said, but you only met X, Y, and Z people. How do you have these conclusions without meeting A, B, or C? He's like, no, I just can't talk to them. Like it's not even in the picture.
You're saying Coates said he couldn't talk to them.
Exactly, right? So he only went to Hebron with Breaking the Silence, who has obviously a political agenda. He would never talk to somebody from Efrat or even from Jerusalem because that's considered, you know, something that's not acceptable. When you're not open to different things. So when you have an Edward Said who is, I would say an anti-Zionist while teaching, right? Teaching Jews and non-Jews. And I think it's important also to understand, even though people go to Columbia or to UCLA or to Harvard, they don't know everything in the world. And so what you present to them might be their only opinion. When a movie, for instance, like Israelism or a film is brought to college campuses by organizations like If Not Now, as Jews, I think it was Brett Stevens who said there's a group of people called As Jews, right? As a Jew, like Jewish Voices for Peace, right? Well, all of a sudden they represent Judaism to the people who never met a Jew before. Um, I think Edward Said, Joseph Mossad, they're in sort of that category. And so, like I said, when they're training people that way, it's complicated. So what I have done over this year, which I've found really interesting, is found those quiet voices that are sort of speaking up. Young man named Hamza Hawadi, who we brought to our rabbis, who maybe I should bring to the teens as well, who left Gaza in August 2023, right before all of this started. He's now living in Germany, and he speaks very critical against Israel and the policies. He's lost a lot of people in Gaza from his family and friends, but he basically, he just tweeted today, he's like, look at the pictures of Sinwar and how he was living and what he has created for my family in Gaza. We have to see a full nuanced picture that both challenges us while also hopefully has some moral clarity. And so, you know, social media speaks to our own algorithm of what we want to hear. It's really hard to go on Twitter and click that person that you don't want to hear to see what it will bring up. But you also have to hear Edward Said and Joseph Mossad to understand and to have that confidence that we used that word earlier, how we can combat it. And and when I say combat, I'm not a combat soldier type of person. I'm a combat relational type of person. And I believe that when we form these relationships with people who's sitting at Harvard and Columbia, I don't know if you've had Shabbos Kestenbaum on this podcast yet, but Shabbos Kestenbaum on the Barry Weiss podcast this week said, who's sitting with me at the Harvard Divinity School? Probably future presidents of the United States. And when I know how they are being trained in Israel and Zionism and foreign policy, it's not looking so good right now. And so what difference can I make? And that comes, I believe, in relationships. When our Barron scholars, I hope will one day be leaders on campus. And who knows, maybe if they're not going to be congressional representatives, they're going to be voting for congressional representatives. And so let's explain to them how this whole system works here.
One
That's
of the
great.
things I'd like to know is, are you working with them to tell so that they can really? I started out life as a print journalist when journalism meant you reported the facts and didn't give your opinion. And so today, that's not true. Even for the one that I read every day, the Wall Street Journal, it's amazing the opinions or the can I say prejudices that get into the news stories, not labeled editorial. So, are you working with young people so that they can really themselves form judgments about the articles and videos that they're seeing?
Yes, you should come on Sunday. So after we talk to Sarah Edan, actually this is really neat because the last time I was on the show, we were talking about the rabbinical fellows. The person who is coordinating our program with me is Tori Green. She's an Hebrew Union College rabbinical student, and she was one of our fellows. Because now I know how we train rabbis, and so now I'm excited and comfortable for her to now help me train the next generation because she's honestly closer in age to them than we are. After we hear from Sarah Edan, she's actually going to do a whole learning session about how to read headlines.
Oh,
And yeah,
excellent.
so like when you see this, what's your first initial thought? Let's read the article and see does it match that. So literally, we have planned an activity of how to read headlines from different sources without telling you the source first and where the biases are coming from. So that's
Oh,
just,
I love it. I love it. Okay. I would like to talk to you off about
I love it.
sharing that information because it's so important.
Yes.
Yes, and I think it's important, from what I understand, you know, not only prepare students for to be able to endure and stand up against the anti-Semitism they will come across on campus, but also you're training them to influence the opinion of other students.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I think the influence of opinion comes from relationship building. And we're going to be offering them, I call them VIP experiences. But just last week, somebody with the APAC Political Network had a congressperson from Indiana at their home. And I said, will you invite your leaders? So, oh my gosh, our Barron scholars are primed for this. And not only that, when they went to them, the host asked the teens to ask the question, right? So they're beginning those pieces. This coming week, we just heard that the hostage, 20-year-old Ron Barslavsky, who's still captive in Gaza, his mom will be in LA and she wants to speak to a group. I said, this is the group. This is the group that I want to literally meet face to face so that you see that kids your son's age who are captive in Gaza will make a difference in their schools and tell your son's story. So outside of the curriculum that we have built, are the real experiences that I'm showing them that they can make a difference, bring it to their schools, and when they get to the college campus, I want it to be a natural flow.
That's great.
So, what can our listeners do to help with your programs?
Absolutely. So if you're listening and you're part of a synagogue around the country, and your teams or you can tell your rabbi that you know about the Barron Scholars Program in Los Angeles at Sinai Temple, and we're going to be coming up with the way that it'll work nationally, sort of like we do with our rabbis. We have Zoom seminars, but next year we love to do for all the cohorts a Shabbaton in LA to begin an in-person thing. They know we cohort, and then we go back to our own cities. We do this whole Zoom technology thing. But like if you're in New York on Shabbat, you go to NYU or Columbia, we go to UCLA. We then share what are those experiences? Are they the same conversations on the East Coast, West Coast? If you're in a blue state, red state, what does it look like? We're like living not only in different states, we're living in different worlds sometimes in this own country. And then when you cross the state lines, if you go to University of Florida, but you're from LA, when Texas, like you have to know like the nuances of the place that you're actually going to now. And obviously, if anybody would like to help support that program, we would be honored for that help as well. But really, it's about having our teens be active engagers. We can't have the parents do it for our students. They're not with them. And so nobody teaches somebody how to be a doctor without going to medical school, not a rabbi without going to rabbinical school. We now have the responsibility, and I would say it's on us as rabbis and synagogues, for students in our synagogues to do that hard work so that we can see those results in very short time.
Right. What kind of support is it your program needs?
Yep. So obviously financial support would always be lovely. We want to make sure if we're doing the Shabbaton next year, if we are we're going to JPAC in California, so we'll advocate for Jewish causes on Capitol Hill. But if we're national, I want to make sure that New York kids get to go to Albany, Pennsylvania kids get to go to Harrisburg. I'm not going to name all the capitals because I don't want to forget them. But there's that piece, and then obviously to get the best scholars and experts in the world, we want to make sure that we have the resources to do that. Thankfully, also with relationships, if you think you have an amazing speaker that should be in front of our students, let's do it. And we're always up for new ideas and initiatives. Sinai Temple is a place that is thankfully at the forefront of innovation, and we are not only living through historical times, but we are part of historical times. And so I want Sinai Temple to be an innovator for that. And we don't really have walls anymore based on these screens. And so we can do stuff that we never have thought of even a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
Rabbi, thank you so much. We're coming to the end. Is there anything else? I mean, it's been an amazing interview, but is there anything else you'd like to add?
I just want to say that how impressed I am with these students. Like I said, at 17, I don't know if I could have entered the college space. I was a very shy kid who didn't get involved with stuff that I didn't feel I had confidence. Like going to Evelyn's word, I didn't have that confidence until I became a rabbi and met my local congressperson through APAC. That I realized that they actually wanted to speak with me because they knew that I could speak with other people. And I want even a high school student to understand that. And I want to go back I want to go back to 17 years old and be them because I'm watching these kids, and I say kids make this difference. These are 17 years old. I've known these kids since they were 6 now. I've sung Bim Bam on the carpet. I've done their bar and bat mitzvahs now, and they're at a point where we like to say they need us, but we need them as much as they need us. And so if there is just that small kernel that I can help them be who we need them to be, then I'm all in, and we all need to be in together.
I like that, who we need them to be.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Anyway, thank you so much for this. I thank our listeners. For those of you who would like to know more about Evelyn and myself and our work, you can go to Never Again Is Now podcast at YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And please, as we ask at the end of every one of these episodes, speak up against anti-Semitism and all hate.